I took a brave step to compete with him. He says he's running a competition against us. Slow as I come, can write him to settle. They got rages. I gave my assurance I could walk right now. Lonely. I was the only child in the home.
He is a giant, you know. My name is Vendall Williams. I'm the only daughter of Mr. Gurney Alexander Gibson, and this documentary is all about him.
I have been wanting for a long time. It's a good area.
Dad was born in the small village of Lomans Hill on May 2nd, 1929. Shortly after his birth, he was entrusted in the care of his grandmother in Camden Park. He lived with her until her death when he was 23 years old. Sadly, he missed out on having any family life.
Lonely. I was the only child in the home. That was in Camden Park. Lomans, I born in Lomans. My mother was in Lomans, but my grandmother was living alone in Camden Park. My grandmother was told that my mother is pregnant again. So there was no room for me this kind of time. She was living in her father's house. So just imagine that is congestion. Anyhow, my aunt brought me to my grandmother. She said it was a year and 9 days old. My grandmother sent me to school. I must have was about 4 or 5 or something. And I was taught with a woman called Miss Elaine Deschamps. She had a son named Vibert. She come from near the hospital down Rotterdam. And she helped me to get my lunch. She fixed my lunch because I was young. Must have was about 5. So it was too far to walk back to Camden Park with bigger children and walk back. So she helped me to fix my lunch. She told me one day, tell your grandmother to give you something different for lunch. She gave you some sugar and some bread. Switch it up. Tell her I want some tea or some juice or something. I told my grandmother that, and they tried to. My grandmother was feeble. She was about 70 or 60 something. But anyhow, I get through and I went on to stage 3 and I got up to the ABC.
His primary school days came to an end and it was with much elation and pride that he rushed home to tell his grandmother that he was given a scholarship to attend the boys' grammar school. He thought she would be so proud of him. His grandmother just took one look at him and said, "Boy,
your father did not go to grammar school. He went to ordinary school. Go and learn trade in him." I felt disappointed because I had him in mind about doctor or something special.
I feel that it was perhaps a good thing for him not to have gone. In my case, it would have been a tragedy because I had to be a doctor, full stop. At age 7, this was an irrevocable decision, as I told you the reason for this. But in his case, I don't know what he had in mind, but I feel what he's done for this country is far more significant than I think it would have been if he had chosen even one of his so-called professions. And longer it was being a doctor or a lawyer, which is rubbish.
But that had to fail because that need money. So forget it.
But I think Gurney's contribution is far more significant than it would have been had he been in any other profession.
I'm kind of the opinion that I'm glad it didn't happen that way. Because had he gone to grammar school and did his GCE or whatever, it's possible he might have, got a job with a company or whatever. And I don't think he would have accomplished what he has accomplished, over the years, up to this point. So I think it gave him more drive, by not going to grammar school. I think that helped him more than hurt him.
Maybe if he had gone to school, and he might have taken a different path. And with that, he would not be involved in construction and eventually materials, selling materials, opening a hardware, selling materials. So although that took place in his life, I think sometimes he looked at it too negatively, rather than look at it that is what really made him.
After my grandmother died, when my grandmother died, my father told me, "You alone couldn't live in this house." He says, he encouraged me to come to Montreal to live with him. And I started to think about my life. After my grandmother died, and I came to my father, I had to make my mind, I had to do something else. I had to get somebody who's going to take care of me and love me and so forth.
I can't remember the year, but we were having convention over over there, going up to the police station. So Lago Height, yeah. So there's where we met. Looking at him, he was a very attractive boy. Looks really romantic, and I said, "Why he looks mischievous too," and he was mischievous. We wasn't that too close because I grew up a very shy girl.
I didn't get to chat much, but I just saw her. And then I met her in town. I think I used to talk her on the phone. And she would tell me what time she comes to town. So I would go and meet the lunch to say hello to her.
We start to see one another a little more regular. Then I used to come to town on Saturdays at time my father has a lunch to learn music. And then we used to see again, but not for a long period. Just a hello, because mother is in the way always.
Her father used to operate a lunch named Daisy D. So she would come down with Daisy D. I first thought one of the girls was named Daisy. But They used to bring us lunch and they come up to carry the mails to government, carry people buying things. I used to go on the wharf and then go down on the lunch and chatter or something.
So anyway, he started to visit us down at Leeward. But he is like there. My mother is here and I am here. So we never have any to say where we could touch hand or we could hug. Never.
I rode a bike to Garden Yard the day the Queen took the throne. Late here they kept it up. They call it Coronation Day. I couldn't get no time to go down there to Garden Yard. I used to go like a Saturday lunchtime and not walking the Sunday. Have meeting in her house, family house, and come back up the next Monday morning with the lunch. We never used to see much. But when I rode the bike, I left up here in the morning about 8 o'clock. I think I told her to come in. When before we married, I had one piece of communication. Very grateful of it. She had a telephone in the home. In the year 1953, she had a telephone in the house and the others didn't have. It was the government phone. And this is the government put it there. I was living near to the British pastoral up there, the government house. The orderly for the government house was a fellow named Murphy, and his father was my godfather. So he used to give me some privilege to use the telephone free. I used to get to talk to him.
I was hoping to go to Canada. But then as this friendship between me and Gurney, when I said, oh, I think I'm going to Canada. He said, for what? I said, just go to Canada. He said, no, your father will send you. I said, I want to go. If my brother sent for me, I will go. So there way he started to get serious. And then he proposed marriage. He wrote this letter to my father.
I had to write him a letter before he to come to the home. Invitation to come to the home, I had to get permission.
When my father asked me, he said, Gurney wrote me this letter, give me to read. He said, what do you think about that? Do you love him to marry to? I looked at him, I said, I don't know. He said, you don't know? Who will know for you? So I said, well, I don't know. I never tell him yes, no.
And he said like this, he says, you have given me consent I can marry her, but not too distant future. That's the words. I asked him in permission I love his daughter. And I asking him permission if he can come to his home. And he wrote back and tell me I'm welcome. It was official.
He thought it was time now that he started his family, so he got married to our mom in 1954 after a short courtship. He was 25 years old then, and she was barely 18. He built his own house in Walker Peace, New Montrose within a year of his marriage, just in time for the birth of my first brother. This he accomplished with only 5 workers.
Said, okay, we're going to build a house. I said, okay. If even you put on the roof, we live in it. So happened anyway, he and 2 fellas, and he built that house. He get on the roof, he put on the windows. I said, well, the painting could come after. We live in it like that. We know it's a shelter. And we were so happy when we moved there. Real happy, just 2 bedrooms.
He designed his house with a small basement where he set up a furniture shop.
The first person ever paid me a check, write a check for me for work in this country in my life was Dr. Gurney. He came from Grenada to take over the hospital. And his furniture came afterward masticated and dirty up. And he get rent a house near to Monte Copper, house below, and he road. Grandmother was living there when he came from Grenada. And he called, get somebody, and somebody called me and said he want me to put his furniture in order for him because I can't use them to mash up and somehow clean up. And I went there and fixed them up and so forth. And but myself and two of my apprentice boys in the workshop went and fixed up Dr. Cyrus, Dr. Gunman furnitures and so forth. And when he went to pay me, I tell him how much he paid me a check. The first check I ever get in my life. Because I never used to work with my father and so forth. Policy's furniture didn't look pretty and new. And he said thank you and so forth.
Dad remembers purchasing his very first piece of land. He didn't have enough money and he desperately wanted the land. The only person who would help him was Mr. Cyril Prescott, who lived in Montrose. He loaned him the money so he could make his purchase.
I built the first house night and day. She was making her first son. And I wanted him not to born in my father's house. So I had to hustle. Right in Walker piece there. No bath, no washroom, just 2 bedrooms. I built the blocks myself to build the blocks. I remember a fella come to me that evening and building the blocks. He says, Mr. Gibson, I stop you and then he come from up the hill there. And I see you coming every evening, changing blocks, making blocks and so forth. Could you give me a job to work with you? I said, where are you from? He named Sutherland up on the hill. Bartram Sutherland. He come to work with me until he go to England. They run the workshop and so forth. He had another named Eustace Robertson.
I came and met Eustace working in the workshop with him. There were other guys there. There were the Sutherland brothers from Lomans, brothers of the famed Sylvia Sutherland, you know. And they worked there for a period of time. I remember Adu, Ulrich Duncan, and he worked there for a period of time also. And all those guys worked in the workshop, and we were always around them. That is how I developed my joinery skills or furniture making skills.
In the beginning, he was living at Walker Peace, right? And I worked there with him, and then when he moved to Cane Garden, I went to Cane Garden and worked with him.
He continued to work with his father. He would return home at nightfall only to take up another task of furniture building in his basement. Here he would work until late into the night, hardly eating, hardly resting. Sometimes when we were asleep, Mom would join him and help with the sanding and polishing of the furniture.
When he was running the workshop in Montrose, I used to be in the workshop at nights with him, helping him. I do sanding, even the caning. I help cane chairs. I help him sand furnitures. I hold lumber for him. I used to work in the workshop until late in the night. Well, after I got Mike, well, then I ceased down from that.
He had a little workshop downstairs that he himself used to work, build furniture. In those days, his outlet was Hadley Brothers. Hadley Brothers was a store right at the market square area there. It's now where Bank of St. Vincent is. And so in those early days, I remember him building furniture when he got home and building the furniture and get a hire vehicle and send them off to Hadley Brothers. And there's where, he started developing himself. There's where that was part of his entrepreneurial spirit, and I think that is what, started it all.
Some of his fine handwork is still in his home today. In 1949, he bought his first form of transportation, a bicycle. He then went on to buy a motorbike. This he used to carry the first 2 children to school, putting one behind and the other in front of him.
Mike and Eddie.
I remember that first day of school, took me to school on a motorbike, a Zonda to be specific. The school was on Back Street, on the way to Edinburgh, right opposite the hospital. So it's in Rose Place, per se. And I remember getting off the bike and I was heading across the road and they said, no, little boy, come. And he took my hands and went down this alleyway to my preschool.
I carried them to school. I carried them in a little motorcycle called Quickly. And Mike was settled in for first he was there about a year before. When I carry Mike, when I carry Eddie would not settle. He stand up outside the school for the whole day. When I go to pick him up, you don't say much. Mike was more free. And I used to take him on this motorcycle, one in behind to hold on and put Eddie in front and carry him for lunch. Up the hospital road, and the hospital road was one way straight. And carried him back for lunch. And that went on until they was able to go to higher school.
Dad was always a busy man. As children growing up, we hardly saw him. And I mean, we understood because we had Mom, because Mom was always with us. We did everything together with Mom. So the only time that Dad normally spent time with us actually is like on weekends. He made sure and put aside his weekends for us. On Saturdays, we would go to the beach, go driving around the place and stuff like that. And on Sundays was church day. We would go to church in the morning, we come back home, we have lunch together. After lunch, he would designate parts in the Bible, scriptures, and so that we have to learn, and him and Mom will go to sleep. And we have to learn when he wakes up in the evening now, he will pick us up with it.
Give us these assignments and it would be to maybe read a scripture or something, from the Bible, and he would test us on it when he get up later on in the afternoon. And we better know what it we better have the answers when he asks the questions.
By the time there was another addition to the family, he realized that the bike could not carry all 5 of us. So he promoted himself to a car, which he bought in 1961.
1793. Austin A40. I bought it in 1961. I borrowed some cash from a lawyer called Lawyer Nanton. And I bought a piece of land with the cash for $2,000 something. And I set about and I built a house in it. And I got through with that project. That was my first investment project. I got through in that project in about 6 months. And I sold the house, and the profit I made, I bought that car.
I remember the first car he had, an Austin A40, and we would, all 6 of us would get into that car and go down to Gurney to visit my grandparents, and that was almost like a tradition every Saturday, and we would stay down there until it get dark and come back up.
Dad realized that in order for him to be a successful builder, he would have to further his education to meet the demands of modern-day building techniques. He was encouraged to take night classes in building construction at the Technical Center in Kingston. He was determined to make up for the lost education he should have had while he was a youth. He attended classes 3 nights per week and completed the course in 2 years.
Formal evening classes in building construction started in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Gurney was one of the outstanding members are students in that program.
He was finally ready to face the large projects he had his eyes set on. In 1957, he quit working with his father and started his own building profession. He started off by building houses and selling them, making a profit to build another. This continued well into 1966.
I sold one to these people, the same talk about, called Dandrad. I sold another one to a fellow who was in England. He used to paint for me before he went to Maskell. One so. I sold one to Miss Agard. Her husband was a taxi. Used to drive taxi. The one in front of native Ben Richards used to live there. As you go up the hill, before you get to Durant, right in the corner there. I sold one to, I can't remember everything, but I sold a few houses in Montrose. I sold one to Deacon, he used to be a minister. He rented from me and then he bought it from me.
How much you sold it for?
$12,000.
12,000. I can't buy land now.
I bought the land for $800 and something, and I borrowed him $2,000 from the building loan. A fellow named Mr. Ford, and when I reached a certain stage, he lent me some more money.
One of his aunts, hearing about him, asked him to build her house for her.
This is my first contract on my own. My aunt's house came from Aruba.
Word got around then about this aspiring young builder, and very soon he had his hands full.
He worked for the Johnsons, which they said those people had shares in the Canadian Ford company. He worked for Guy Thomas. That house, 2 houses is down in Rose Cottage, and he built one for Eldon Thomas. That is up where former Prime Minister Tito houses. That glass house above there is going to build that.
He was in great demand then. While living in Montrose, he built over 18 houses, some for clients and some he built on his own and sold.
He was regarded in the 60s and 70s and up to mid-80s. He was an established contractor, reputable contractor. Most people, when they're ready to build homes, they will come to him. I believe, I don't know if that record still holds, but at one time he built the most houses in St. Vincent for any single person. I'm not too sure if that still holds. So he had quite a reputation in those days.